How's it going, everyone? I'm Jerred Z. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about editing. One of the questions I get in my classes quite often is, why do you edit certain things in your photographs? Like, what's the purpose of editing? And I want to go and make a video that talks about that a little bit because I think that's important. I think there's a lot of videos and tutorials out there that talks about how to edit. You know, here's how you do the exposure and contrast, and here's what all the different buttons mean and all that stuff. And that's all cool, right? It's all good stuff. We need to know that stuff. But I think a lot of people, even knowing that stuff, they get kind of caught up in the, what do I do? Like, I have a picture, what do I do? And so I wanted to go through a couple of different steps and a couple of different checkpoints for you to be able to use if you want to get better at editing and know why you're doing it instead of just how. So the first thing that I look at when I'm looking at, like, why do I want to edit a certain thing in a photo is just brightness levels, right? That's the basics. So looking at your photograph and trying to figure out whether it's bright or dark enough in the right areas. And that's number one, right? Is just really basic exposure levels to make it, your image, make it look better. All right, so like this image of a leaf is incredibly underexposed. So I was out shooting in different areas and I got, decent exposures and then a bad exposure. Probably just I was in shade after coming out from brightness. So that's the first thing. And the reason why that's important is this photo might not be that great, but it's hard to judge your photographs when you're in your editing station and you're going through all your photographs. Like, which photo do I keep versus which photo do I delete? And I usually try to make them look as good as they can, real basically. Make sure their brightness levels are there, make sure the darks are there. And then I can go in and evaluate them. So the first reason why I'm going in and editing my photographs is just to make them look consistent and bright and make them look good so I can evaluate which ones are keepers and which ones are deletes. So like, for instance, this one within the Adobe Lightroom, I'm just gonna throw that up there. And at this point, my brightness levels are okay, but if you could tell, the photograph is extremely gray. Matter of fact, there's almost only grays there. So I need to work on my contrast levels, right? So I'm just trying to get a baseline. So I'm gonna push it in my whites to make my brightness levels look a little bit better. And then I'm gonna take my blacks down to make my darks look a little bit better. And real quickly, I'm gonna warm up the entire photograph. If you look at the, oops, wrong one. If you look at the background's like really, really blue, which is not always bad, right? That's kind of cool, the blue and the yellow. But what I wanna do is warm everything up a little bit. And now I have a photograph that's real, like, punchy, bright. I started there and I got to there. So now I can make an evaluation on how good this photograph is and whether I want to keep it and maybe whether I want to continue to edit it. The second thing I'm looking for when I'm editing my photographs and trying to figure out what to do is the center of interest, right? The center of visual interest, I think, is what the old school term for it, or just what is your subject, and is it possible in editing to go in and make your subject more apparent or to stand out more or to bring your viewer's eyes over into your subject, right? So editing could be a part of that process. Now, the best photographs are generally, you start off with that, right? You use composition and in-camera settings like depth of field and all that stuff to make your subject stand out the way that you want it to. But you are usually today, when you're shooting raw especially, you're thinking about the future and what you're gonna do in the editing process. And so this is an example of a photograph where I think it's pretty cool, but I could probably work to bring my center of visual interest out just a little bit more, just a touch, a little bit more. So this is in Iowa somewhere, and I have this amazing, incredible sky, cornfields, and some kind of barn-like structure. I'm not exactly sure if there's any farmers out there, you can let me know what this thing is. But I like the photograph quite a bit, right? It's pretty cool. That epic sky is amazing. But what I do want to do is make the barn come out a little bit more. And so in this photograph, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to use some masking in Lightroom. So I'm just clicking on the masking tool. I'm going to brush this thing because it doesn't have to be super precise for what I'm going to do. And I'm going to just isolate my subject a little bit, the top of this barn structure. And I'm not going to worry too much about some of the corn I'm getting. This is not a perfect, I'm not going for perfection here. I do want to make sure that I'm not getting a lot of the clouds though, because the clouds are going to make it look a little bit weird. So I've selected the barn in the photograph, and so what I'll do now is I'm just going to push the exposure up a little bit. I'll push the whites up and the contrast just a touch, and I'm going to make it stand out even more, right? So that looks that looks a lot better. So my eye goes directly to that. Remember, our eyes look at areas of contrast. White against dark, you'll look at the white. Most likely, it's whatever, this white against the dark background, you'll look at the white. If it was a white background, you had a dark subject, you'll probably look at the dark. The areas of contrast is where you look. And this looks pretty awesome. So this is what I started with, and that's what I ended with. That's better, right? It's a little bit better as far as bringing my eye into the subject, and I don't have to do very many more edits. But this small touch made a dramatic impact on the photograph if you look at the before and after. I like that a lot. All right, and so the third step in editing for me generally, and I'm sure there's many other steps, right? There's a lot of different photographers who take different approaches, but for me, the third step is generally going in and making my photo ready for the final product, whether that's a print or whether it's going to be posted on Instagram or whether it's going to be put on some kind of flyer for whatever reason I would want to put something on a flyer. I'm just using that as an example. But I'm going to, for instance, print this photograph right here as a 16 by 20, which is a little bit of a different crop ratio. So I'm getting ready to print it the exact way that I want to see it when I press the print button and get it back from the printer. So this photo I think looks pretty good as far as editing goes. I think the only thing I could possibly do is maybe make my whites come out just a touch more, kind of increase that contrast. My brightness levels, the ceiling for my white levels, I'm going to boost that. And now I'm going to go to the crop tool, and this is where I'm going to do a 16 by 20, which is a 4 by 5 crop. And we're going to center it to where I want it so it's not random or the printer doesn't choose it themselves, like that. And then, of course, you're going to send it to the printer as a JPEG most likely. So I'm going to print a JPEG large, and I'm going to tell it where to export it, export the image, and then I have my print file ready to be sent to the printer and get back an awesome image cropped exactly the way I want it to be cropped. So there you have it. Those are some 3 things to think about when you're asking yourselves, why should I edit this photograph? Number 1 is just getting it ready, the brightness levels to make it look as good as it can so you can evaluate whether it's a worthwhile photo to continue editing. Number 2 is to make your center of visual interest or your subject stand out. And then number 3 is just the final touches. What do you need to do in order to get it ready to print? That might include some other things like getting rid of dust in the sky. It might be some more intense edits if you're doing like a portrait and you're going to go in and soften the skin. You're getting it ready for the final life of the image, which might be to deliver to the client. So there might be some options there that you need to consider. So hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought. Subscribe if you want to continue to see some updates from me. I love photography. It is the coolest thing. I'm super happy that photography is in my life, and I hope to bring that kind of energy and that love of this art to other people. So let me know how I'm doing, how I can do better in the future. We will talk to you all later.